One, two, one. Oh my God. One, two, one, two. Mm-hmm.
Just be careful if you speak in front of the sound system.
It's interrupts.
So maybe stand.
Mm-hmm. One, two, one, two. I need to cut my mic, Fred. Welcome. One, two. Welcome, everybody. Feel free to take seats up at the top of the room. Don't be shy. Yeah. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The Destination Europe Summit will kick off in a couple of seconds. Please take your seats. You can move to the top of the room. Good morning. Welcome. Good morning. Welcome. Good morning. Buongiorno. Good morning. Need more people up here. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A very, very warm welcome to Brussels, to this beautiful sunny morning, to the city centre. Please take your seats. We would like to kick off the Destination Europe Summit as soon as possible. While you're taking your seat, feel free to make sure that your mobile phone has access to the Wi-Fi. The code is "You are amazing!" That way you can use the Slido app. A little bit of an optimistic boost there to cheer up everyone in the morning there with the "You are amazing." Please take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. Don't be shy to come up straight to the front of the room. A warm welcome as well to all those who are joining us today online on the live stream. You're watching the Destination Europe Summit, brought to you by the multilingual European news network Euronews, as well as the European Travel Commission. If you're using social media today, please use the hashtag Destination Europe Summit. So, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and allow me to welcome you all here to Brussels, to the Destination Europe Summit. I'm delighted to see you all here today in the room, and a warm welcome again to all those joining online on our live stream on the website, and also a warm welcome to our Euronews viewers joining us as well on our YouTube channel. Please do download the Slido. You can just pop your phone up towards the QR code as well. It's pretty simple. So throughout the event, you can ask questions and you can participate in polls. My name is Maeve McMahon. I'm a journalist with Euronews here in Brussels, and I'm delighted to be with you for this event that, as I said, is brought to you by Euronews and the European Travel Commission. It is, ladies and gentlemen, the first event of its kind. And there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot at stake for the tourism and travel sector as we reach peak season. We have a volatile geopolitical situation in Europe. We have a cost of living recession. We have a climate and biodiversity crisis. And there's a lot at stake. There's a lot to talk about. And I'm delighted to be here with you for this. And a little bit later here on stage, we'll also be joined by the European Commissioner for the Internal Market. That's Thierry Breton, the Frenchman. We'll also be joined up on stage here by members of the European Parliament, by member states. Also, we'll be joined by destinations, and of course, very importantly, by industry. But without further ado, now that everyone's seated and settled, I would like to give a very, very warm welcome. Put your hands together for Eduardo Santander, the Executive Director of the European Travel Commission. Eduardo, join me up on stage.
Thank you, May. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, dear friends, let me start conveying a very warm welcome message from our ETC President, Mr. Miguel Sanz, who unfortunately couldn't be here today due to unexpected sickness, and also paying a little homage to our former President, Luis Araujo, and our former President, Peter de Wilde, for their leadership. I'm just representing all our members in my capacity of Executive Director, and I'm very honored to do this job today. It is with great pleasure and excitement that I welcome each and every one of you to the inaugural Destination Europe Summit, hosted by Euronews and European Travel Commission. Thank you, Mev. Today, we gather here to reflect on the challenges faced by the tourism industry in the aftermath of a global pandemic, and to discuss also the most important thing, which is the future of our sector. The impact of COVID-19, not that I have to explain you too much about it in our beloved industry, has been unprecedented, and we witness things like around Europe, closed borders, grounded planes, dreams of Wanderlust completely put on hold for years. And however, we know that the resilience is something very, very much embedded in a beautiful tourism industry, has brought us again here to Brussels today. And we enter very summer, peak season of summer, with a lot of question marks, but also we are witnessing the comeback of tourism across Europe with obviously very, I would say, positive feeling about it, but also with a little bit of concern. And we are going to discuss that in very much detail today during the conference. European destinations are leading the global tourism research. Post-COVID, the rebound has been very impressive, but we must ask ourselves today, is the recovery fueled still by pent-up demand and revenge travel spirit, or are we witnessing the true resilience of the travel industry? These questions lingers in our minds as we navigate the challenges ahead. Undeniable, the tourism industry in Europe continues to face numerous headwinds. Economic uncertainties, rising prices that pose significant concerns, and so on, mentioned before by Mev. The ongoing war in Ukraine and air transportation restrictions for European airlines add further complexity to the equation. It is essential to address these issues and find durable solutions to ensure Europe's global competitiveness. At the European Travel Commission, we monitor trends to and within Europe. Today, I am very pleased to offer you a sneak peek into our latest research on intra-European travel, set to be released in the next days. Our findings reveal that European travel intentions for the next 6 months remain very high, to 69%. But there is a slight decline of 4% compared to the summer 2023. So those talking about a record year 2023 will see it at the end of the summer. Of particular concern is the increasing worry among Europeans about the economic situation. Approximately 24% of European travelers express concerns regarding the overall rise of travel costs. I think you all have felt it, some of them even staying here in Brussels today, know that the cost of accommodation, the cost of transportation has massively increased. Additionally, 17% of Europeans are generally concerned about their own finances, and that's becoming more and more an issue for our industry. Moreover, our new research sheds light on another urgent matter: climate change mitigation. Almost 8% of European travelers identify extreme weather events as a significant worry. This heat in Brussels for the last 4 or 5 weeks is nothing but abnormal. These findings emphasize the pressing need for sustainable transformation within the tourism industry. So we all have to step in here and also do our little thing for this tremendous, difficult, but also essential transformation. We will delve into the latest travel trends, examining both the supply side and the consumer demand, and it is evident that people express an increasing interest in traveling more ecologically and sustainable, but let's face it, there's still not enough of that on the shelves to be bought from the consumer side. So the question remains, does this intention align with their actual actions? Are we really walking the talk, or are we still talking, and talking? This conference is meant not to be just a talking conference, Mev. We talked this morning over breakfast about that. It's about really actions. It's just enough from talking. We need to move on to the next stage. We have assembled an incredible lineup of speakers from various EU institutions, the industry, the European destinations, each bringing their expertise, insights, challenges, concerns, but also opportunities. As we are getting closer to the next elections here at the European level, this event will also serve as a legacy statement of the current EU legislation and provide a list of priorities for the next one to address. So we all will be taking notes and see how are we going to be dealing with this with the next Commission, with the next Parliament, with the next Council. In conclusion, I extend my deepest gratitude to all of you joining us on this occasion here in Brussels in this beautiful venue. And particularly our partner Euronews. Thank you so much for this first, but definitely not last partnership with you. And let us please use this opportunity to reimagine and rebuild the tourism industry in Europe. Together, we can really navigate the challenges, overcome the headwinds, and create a future that ensures the prosperity and well-being of both the industry and the travelers who cherish our destination. Thank you very much. Have a very good and fruitful day. Good luck and good work. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Eduardo Santander, the Executive Director there of the European Travel Commission. Not mincing his words, putting out exactly what is at stake here at the table, that this conference, Destination Europe, should not just be about talking, it should be about actually proposing real practical solutions. We all know, of course, what the problems are. What we need is solutions that will work and will work for you. And as I said, a little bit later, we'll be up here on stage. We'll be joined by the European Commissioner Thierry Breton for the internal market. But now, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for our first panel session. It's entitled Getting There. And the opportunity here is to listen to industry, to destinations, and of course to lawmakers. We have an MEP as well coming up on stage to talk about what the challenges are and of course the opportunities. So without further ado, allow me to invite our panel up here on stage to join me. First up, we have the Spanish ambassador, Raúl Fuentes Milani, from the Spanish Perm Rep to the European Union. A very busy man as of this Saturday when Spain takes over the EU presidency of the European Union. Are you ready?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah? Welcome.
Pleasure.
Take a seat over there. Lovely to see you. Raúl Fuentes Milani, Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us. And joining us from Austria, we're delighted to welcome Susanne Kraus-Winkler. She's the Austrian State Secretary for Tourism and also has a past in the hotellery and the hospitality, so you're well placed to be with us here this morning. Welcome. Welcome. We're also joined, ladies and gentlemen, by the well-known MEP Juan Fernando López Aguilar from the Canary Islands. He's a Spanish MEP and also the chair, may I add, of the Libe Committee. Good to see you. You're very welcome, sir. How are you?
Hi.
Take a seat.
Good day, everybody.
And to get a perspective from industry, I'm delighted to welcome Jorge Casal. He's the Vice President for New Markets at Global Blue. Good morning to you. Welcome. Sit here. We're also welcomed by one of our hosts, that Peter de Wilde, right here from Flanders. He's the president of Next Tour. That's the network for European regions for sustainable and competitive tourism. Peter, as many of you know, is also the CEO of Visit Flanders. Welcome. And finally, last but not least, all the way from Portugal, we're delighted to welcome Luís Araújo. He's the president of Tourism de Portugal. You're very welcome.
Hello.
Good to see you. Take a seat. I shall also take a seat and also just say once more hello to our viewers online on our live stream. If you're using social media, the hashtag is Destination Europe. And in a minute, of course, we'll be also taking the temperature of the room by using some polls. But first, let's just have a chat first about what the situation is like across Europe now. We heard earlier about COVID and how this was obviously very disruptive for the industry. But Luís Araújo, if you may, just talk us through how European tourism is doing since the pandemic and which markets have bounced back and which are still struggling.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Well, Europe is coming back. I think last year was a record year for many countries in Europe. We reached almost 80% of 2019, which was a record year for every country in Europe. And this year we're on the same track. I think must be 5 to 10% below 2019. Some countries are above, especially the southern European countries. In my case, Portugal, this year is growing 42% the revenues compared with 2022. But there are still some countries struggling, not only because of the dependence on certain markets, especially Russia, but due to connectivity also. And I think that's the biggest concern and challenge. In terms of markets, the United States is responding very heavily to many of our destinations. And I think that's, I won't say it's a surprise, I think it's a perfect fit with what the American market needs. And we hope that this year, 2023, will be a record year for any country inside Europe. That doesn't mean we don't have challenges. We have lots of challenges, but we're here to discuss also that.
And you can see the Americans are here en masse. I've seen it myself as I've been traveling across the continent recently. And I spoke to some Americans about this, and they call it the Americans or the European summer. It's like this dream that every American has to spend their time here. Let's get the perspective now perhaps from Austria and hear from you about how the recovery has been there and what different trends you've seen for intra-European and overseas markets.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me today. It's similar. Austria is very well on track. We had a speed recovery from tourism. You must understand that in Austria more than 80% are coming from Europe, so most of our tourists are coming from Europe. I also can confirm that there are a lot of Americans because of the exchange rate, because of the cultural heritage. Everything is interesting for the American guests. What we see is that also Austria is approximately 10% behind when we count overnights. Revenue is more or less the same. That this is also we don't have an open Asian market right now. Austria is still not on the white list of China. We don't know why. There is a difference between the different countries. Not all European countries are on the white list for group travel from China. And there is no information about that right now when it will open again. The Asian market opened later than all the other markets. So specifically for guests from long-haul markets besides the US, there is still a challenge, but we were looking to other source markets and we were very successful, specifically from the Middle East and the Near East. It's interesting how much the travel from those areas increased.
Okay, interesting. Let's bring in the perspective from Peter de Wilde here from Belgium and hear how you think, from where you're sitting, how has Europe's position in global tourism changed since the pandemic? I mean, Europe used to be the leader, as we've heard, but is it still the leader?
I think Europe will remain the leader for many years to come, but it's how you define leadership. I think Europe can claim leadership in reinventing itself as a tourism destination by making sure that our strategy is watertight and is doing what it should do, making better places to live for people in Europe so that they are also better places to visit. And when you look from a regional perspective throughout Europe, we have a very fragmented image of what is going on. You have several regions that are back on track if you take 2019 as a reference, which we would very much put into doubt, but they're back on track on the numbers. And what is a trend that is really there to stay apparently, because we see it confirmed also this year, is the domestic travel. Let's take my region, Flanders. I think we have an increase of 14% of domestic travel this year, which is tremendous. And there are, of course, you can think of a lot of reasons why people would travel domestically. But I think we need to look at the European level also and define domestic travel as intra-European, intra-regional or intra-national travel within Europe, and tackle this process as a domestic issue. We would never tolerate bad connection within our destinations. Why would we tolerate doing so in Europe if we consider travel in Europe as domestic travel?
Okay, let's bring in the perspective now from Jorge Casal, the Vice President for New Markets at Global Blue. How has the recovery been from your perspective?
Well, the recovery so far continues to be very solid. During the month of May, the recovery versus pre-COVID levels in continental Europe has reached 121%. And that's a particularly good number because despite the fact that Chinese are not yet fully recovered, they are basically around 43% of what they used to spend in shopping before the pandemic. Some other nationalities like US and Middle East travelers, the recovery rate is above 250%. So also in terms of the future, when we look at some of our barometers, the intention of Chinese travelers, 85% of them are willing to travel very soon. And also for them, tax-free shopping is a big incentive. So 63% of them, they point out as tax-free shopping as the main reason to shop in Europe.
Okay, and we'll come back to that topic of shopping a little bit later. But now I'd like to bring in the perspective from our Spanish guest, our ambassador from the Perm Rep. As I said earlier, you'll be taking over the presidency this Saturday, the 1st of July. Also during peak tourism season. Spain, of course, as well, a powerhouse for tourism. Will tourism be a priority for you? And are you expecting a smooth, seamless summer of travel? Or will you be a little bit on crisis mode in case anything goes a little bit wrong?
Well, tourism is always a priority for Spain. This is no doubt. In the program of our presidency, we will try to bring tourism across different sectors and make the first steps towards making tourism a policy of the Union. There are elements in the legislative program which have also a strong impact on tourism. We will negotiate with Parliament the trialogues on the data exchange by short-term rental platforms, which we believe will make a change. It is a groundbreaking piece of legislation. But more than this, we will try to bring tourism to different strands of our work, in environment, in other areas, in digital, and try to put together a policy, a tourism policy, which should be sustainable. And we will focus on that sustainability of tourism regarding environment, digital, etc.
Okay. Juan Lopez, anything to add at this stage from what you've heard so far? How has the recovery been from your perspective as an MEP? Obviously bearing in mind that tourism is a competence of the national member states and not a European.
Good day to you all, and thank you for having me. I'm representing here the European Parliament. I'm actually a Canarian. I come from the Canary Islands, which is a touristic region for sure. 35% of the GDP, 36% of our employment in all depends heavily on tourism. So it took the blow of the pandemic and the paralysis of tourism, but tourism is back. And the European Parliament has tried to help in a number of grounds. It's been said that's emerging as a new EU policy, searching for the legal basis in order to set a new strategy. We've been discussing in the European Parliament, but we're putting in place also instruments to bring back Schengen, which is free movement, which helps to enhance and reignite tourism. We're actually working on a Schengen visa application, a digital application, which is well underway. Actually, it's been subject to interinstitutional negotiations, and the agreement was reached by June the 13th. It's going to be voted in the Committee of Liberty, Justice and Home Affairs that I chair. So it's supposed to be a digital application, which is to be handled by the large-scale intelligence data agency of the European Union by the name of EU-LISA. Supposedly, it's going to be voluntary. It's digital delivery of visas. All the biometric data, all the data are to be handled digitally by 2025, but it's going to be mandatory by 2031. So we have been discussing a number of elements of the overall new EU strategy for tourism, including this, reigniting tourism by reigniting free movement and making Schengen governance a tool for that goal, which is certainly shared by us all.
And will this be a good news story for Europe, or could it be another hurdle for travelers?
No, no, it shouldn't be. On the contrary, on the contrary. I mean, certainly free movement is a major asset of the European experience. I actually deem it to be the most appreciated asset of the European experience. But we are putting in place a number of elements within this EU tourism strategy, including the very idea of putting in place agency for tourism.
A European agency for tourism?
Yeah, yeah, which would be real good news. It would be a very good
signal. Does Europe need
signal.
another agency, Peter de Wilde?
Well, it may be discussed, but it's been adopted by the European Parliament, this idea within the resolution. And actually, I'm about to add that the Canary Islands is the candidate whenever the decision is made for being the seat, seat of the Agency of Tourism.
And I'm sure a lot of people would sign up to go and work there. That would be like the dream. But at this stage, I'd like to take the temperature of the room. If people have had the chance to put Slido up on their phones, just so we can check in with you and see what you think is the biggest challenge for the sector this summer, the biggest obstacle to the recovery regarding EU connectivity. You can just choose one answer there. The Russian invasion of Ukraine, inflation, consumers' sustainability concerns, bottlenecks at European airports, or cumbersome border crossing checks and procedures. So if you just look into Slido there for a minute, and we'll come back to you in just a minute with the outcome of that. And just stick to that story on this entry-exit system. Raoul, from your perspective, when will this be working? Will it be something positive, do you think?
Well, this ETIAS thing, I mean, we hoped it would be in place now, but we believe we will need to wait a few more
couple
months.
More years, 25, 26, I think.
I hope it won't be that long. Yeah.
Any reactions here to that?
A good one or a bad one?
Please be honest.
The good one is we're having finally a system that everyone will use, independently where they come from. The bad one is we don't understand why we're talking about this since 2015 and we'll only have it in 2026. I think that's amazing that we want to be the most competitive destination in the world, and we're still postponing things. To tell the truth, I don't know why, because we're just talking about the platform. Electronic platforms are done from one day to the other. And if we want to improve our competitiveness, and we want to be not only the most sustainable destination in the world, but the one where seamless traveling is easier, and we're talking about visa system, but we can talk about payment systems across Europe, or using electronic payment systems across Europe, which in certain countries are so different.
And there's a Commission proposal, in fact, for instant payments.
Yeah, probably we'll have in 2045.
Perhaps.
So
if we're still alive, we'll see. Let's get the perspective from Austria, Suzanne.
Yes, I'm following this discussion and the developments quite closely. And as far as I'm informed, we have to discuss, there is the ETIAS system, there is the e-visa system. ETIAS is about those from third countries who have contracts right now, and the e-visa system is for the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. So it's about competition, because if you follow the developments throughout the world, and if we talk about seamless travel, then I really don't understand why so many other destinations throughout the world are integrating now e-visa systems, and Europe needs until 2031, if I understood you right, because
the digitalization, that's what I said.
The digitalization is the e-visa
digital
system.
Schengen visa, the application will be mandatory 2031, but it's going to be voluntary by 2025.
ETIAS is, right now, those who then have to use ETIAS can travel to Europe without any hurdle, and then they have to register there. So we have to communicate it to all those countries that there is a change. But e-visa is important for us too.
It's important for Austria too. Just tell us why it took so long. I mean, as we heard there from Luisa Rujo, it's been under discussion since 2015.
It takes a lot of investment. It takes a lot of implementation from the member states. It takes a lot of commitment by the member states. A lot of EU funding too. And it takes the agency. IT agency, EU LISA, which is the one responsible to secure interoperability of all databases, not only Schengen information system, visa information system, ETIAS, it is even the criminal record by ETRIS. So there are a number of instruments which are to be interoperable, and it takes EU agency, it takes a lot of financing, it takes a lot of readiness from the member states to implement those elements of the strategy. It takes commitment, it takes time.
And it takes patience, doesn't it? For people perhaps on the other side waiting for clarity and waiting for decisions to be taken faster. Have you anything to say on this?
Clearly, the more easy, seamless the process is for someone to visit a country is it's better. I understand that there is a big technical complexity, but on the other hand, to really achieve the full recovery of the tourism industry, I think all these kind of measures are to be put in place ASAP.
Peter?
Well, what do you want me to say? I was ETC president at the moment when we started the discussion on the ETS and on the whole subject. And look, we are 8 years further. We are an economic crisis further. We are a sanitary crisis further. And we are still talking about it. That is perhaps the core essence of what this tourism industry in Europe is about. It's a lasagna of so many different levels and layers that nobody seems to be willing to cut through the lasagna and say, listen guys, this is the direction that we're going to take for the future. And to my opinion, but I respect European Parliament, but to my opinion, creating a new agency with taxpayers' money, where there's so many organizations in Europe that can build on knowledge and experience, would be a shame of a waste of money.
Do people in the room agree with that? We've got a clap here from the front row. Raul, anything to react to that?
No, not really. I mean, just supporting what has been already said. I mean, this is, it's a very complicated thing. I mean, there is the political commitment to put it together, and we are working in different strands. There is the technical difficulties, and there is the commitment from member states. And of course, this is a complex exercise, but you can be sure that from the institutions we will be making our best really to put it in place as soon as possible.
But where's the vision? Are we missing some vision here? Somebody with vision for the future for this sector? Because as you say, we don't know what crises are coming.
I think it's not a matter of vision, it's a matter of taking the decision and thinking it's important, so let's do it. We had the same with COVID. The COVID certificate was implemented in 3 months. It's exactly the same thing. And we can all drag along about safety of our countries and recognizing everything. Today, with artificial intelligence, with biometrics, with the technological advance that we have, it's almost impossible not to have this very quickly. And I hope that during the Spanish presidency, this will be pushed a little bit further, because we spent 2 terrible years. And we know how tourism was impacted and how our countries were impacted because they didn't have tourism.
And our
so
borders
if
were
we
closed.
don't build resilience based on this, and this is just a small example of what we have to build resilience on.
If I made just a very short comment, in my experience as member of the European Parliament, never, ever tourism was so high in the agenda of the European Parliament, of the European policy and lawmaking. Why? Because it went into a very deep crisis precisely because of the pandemic. One of the ideas of putting in place some kind of an agency which would build on the executive agency for small and medium-sized enterprise by the name of IASME would simply be to setting forth a crisis preparedness mechanism, because tourism went into a very deep crisis. I mentioned my birthplace, the Canary Islands, was terrible, absolutely terrible. An archipelago which is absolutely dependent on tourism, it simply went to a sudden crackdown of the whole thing, and the sector started to ask for EU funding, for EU support, technical best practices, and of course, EU money, seeking for support, seeking for funds. So the idea of this agency would precisely to be in place and to have in place a crisis mechanism for the sector, for the business, for the whole tourism industry, so that it can resort to an exchange of best practices, and there would be technical and legal support as to seek for EU repair, for EU funds. If never, the sector would be in a crisis as the one we have seen.
What you're hearing there?
I'm happy that tourism is now on the forefront also of the interest of the Parliament, because I remember quite well that it took a long time to get there. But of course, tourism is a very specific industry and has sometimes different circumstances than other industries. It's a service industry. We need a lot of labor for performing. It's an industry where the population in every destination is included in a way. This is why we are also, as you said, we need to develop tourism in all the destinations together with the people living there. This is also why we are measuring tourism acceptance now even more intensively than ever before. So tourism is a very specific industry for Europe. But on the other hand, tourism is also a development engine for Europe. It is important for Europe. So with all these sustainability necessities, with the climate change, with mobility challenges, with all the big questions which we have, I think it's important that we are at the forefront in the Parliament. But of course, we all know political processes are difficult and not easily done. So,
yes, we have a lot of nodding here on the right. I'll get your reaction now. But ladies and gentlemen, if you do have any questions, you can pop them into the Slido. Also, those watching us online, if you'd like to ask any questions to our panel, please pop your question there. Also your name, perhaps, and where you're tuning in from, and then we can address them to our panel. We have about just over 15 minutes left. Any reaction there to what you heard?
I'm a convinced and proud European, but I do believe that we shoot ourselves in the foot by ignoring the fact that we need a strong future vision, not only for tourism in Europe, but for Europe itself. Europe should be a union that is built on values, and values that are shared and that tie into the common European identity. I don't know if there's such a thing as a common European identity, but I know there are so many communities in Europe that share a history and that can tap into their... Well, let's talk about freedom, for instance, freedom of travel, freedom of expression, but also competition. It's not fashionable anymore to say that competition is at the core essence of what European excellence has been driving throughout all of these centuries. Why not embrace what our history is about and come together as peoples in Europe and discuss about a profitable future for our European people?
A very idealistic, perhaps, stance there from you?
Idealistic?
I'm just looking at Raoul, who's going to spend the next 6 months locked into trialogues and meetings and dealing with the interests of 27 different people from very different backgrounds, very different interests.
It's a pleasure to me, I mean, to listen to such a committed European, and so I fully share what you say. Indeed, Europe is a community of values. Professor, you could explain why it is a community of values. It is there. It is in the treaties. It's in the acquis communautaire when we talk about values. But it is also a community of action and of policy. And we have policies all across the sectors of the economy. And some of these policies are more integrated than others. We have transport policy, which has a very strong impact on tourism. We have freedom of movement and our immigration policy, which also has a very important impact. We have industrial policy. I'm sure that Commissioner Breton will be able to develop. So we have a number of policies, and all of those really, I believe, make a little contribution to tourism.
But still, the sector needs more clarity, and the sector needs more support, and the sector is extremely worried, Louise.
Yes, we are. Because we don't see specific funding to the enterprises of tourism. This is a sector made by small, very small enterprises across the countries. And when we think about competitiveness of Europe, we have to think that it depends on the competitiveness of each country. And when we think, I'll give you two wonderful examples. Secretary of State just spoke about Austria. 80% of their tourists comes from Europe. 90% of our foreign tourists comes by plane. So any decision taken on taxes on planes, on restrictions on air connectivity has a direct impact on our countries. And I'm talking about Portugal, but we can talk about anyone, even Spain. So totally agree. We need practical things, but there are a few things that would help the industry. And the worst thing that we see is after 2 very difficult years that we had support, yes, we did, things go back to what they used to be. And
back to business as usual.
And back to business as usual is not good for us, because we're heavily dependent on several factors that are national, but can also be European. And if we don't get that consensus between everyone, then we will have things by 2031, 2046, and we don't have the time.
Just briefly, do you feel like over in the Parliament it's just back to normal? Was COVID not a big enough wake-up call? And of course the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
No, not at all. No, not at all. There's much to be done, and precisely I think that throughout this conversation we are rejoining some kind of a common ground. We are reuniting through the conversation, because precisely the idea, yeah, of course, the idea of the European Parliament was actually adopting a resolution by March 2021, right after the pandemic, going out of the pandemic, taking notice of the importance of tourism more than ever before. All of a sudden, all of us realized that half of the tourism throughout the world is European tourism, is a major sector for many member states in terms of GDP, in terms of employment, in terms of development, in terms of industry, in terms of in every possible way. So we adopted a resolution precisely to mandate the Commission to set forth the strategy for the future, planning for the future, sustainable tourism and relaunching tourism. So the point is that tourism should be back, the sooner the better, but healthier than it was, and providing some financial support and some technical support for the industry to be back to life.
And on that point, you mentioned GDP, you mentioned the financial benefits. Let's talk to you again about your favorite topic, which is shopping. Explain how this system works and why it's important to preserve and enhance tax-free shopping. What's at stake here for our economies?
Well, tax-free shopping, it's a system that it works very well. It's a big contributor to the EU27 economy. If we look at how shopping was before the pandemic, and normally people, they think about culture, about landscapes, but shopping is a really important element when choosing a destination, and tax-free shopping in particular is a key incentive to travel and to shopping. Just to put some numbers behind this, in 2019, 10 million people used tax-free shopping, and they have used it across 350 cities in Europe, and they have spent 20 billion euros in shopping. And those are the direct impacts of shopping. When you look at the additional economic impact, tax-free shopping supports more than 230,000 jobs in Europe, contributes by 14 billion to the EU GDP, and generates more than 5 billion euros in terms of tax payments.
Okay. Would you agree with that, Peter?
No doubt, there's no disputing the numbers, and I do think this can be an economic driver in the old sense, but what concerns me more is the local framework of local enterprises. Tourism is typically a business of small and medium enterprises in Europe, and I don't know what happened, but I don't know if you noticed, but I think there has been a huge alien abduction operation during Corona, because now the labor force is gone. There must be a reason for that. And the reason for that, to my opinion, is that they were doing we always said tourism is good because it provides jobs for people with lower schooling. That might be true, but we didn't pay them correctly, I think. They worked hours that were not really normal. They were not getting the respect for the jobs that they did. So it is something that we need to consider. Tourism business is people's business first and foremost.
How is Austria handling that problem of labour shortages?
Well, we are still challenged. We do have this seasonal workers permission system, which works quite well. It's very important right now because this is a system where workers from skilled and unskilled labor, by the way, comes from third countries. And then we have the new red, white, red card for skilled labor employed throughout the whole year. There we're still struggling a bit to adapt it to the digital possibilities. But I would like to raise one other point to that, because we are discussing it. Since I'm in politics, I see that there is no platform for tourism ministers and state secretaries for tourism. There is no platform on this level. I really would like to see the creation of a platform for
a physical platform or a digital platform?
No, a physical platform, because I'm sure that talking together, exchanging views, creating networks on that level is of utmost importance for the future.
So you basically want this summit, Destination Europe Summit, but we invite everyone from every 27 countries.
No, it's about the tourism ministers and the state secretaries, those who are in the different European member countries responsible for tourism, because there is no council for that.
So behind closed doors.
And the Spanish presidency will invite all those. They will organize a meeting in October in Mallorca, as far as I know, but this is always depending on the presidencies. If there is no invitation, then there is nothing happening.
Ambassador, is this something you would contemplate?
Look, we have 10 grouping of ministers established in the regulations, and those unfold into a number of groupings. For instance, in Coreper 2, the area in Coreper 1, where I work, we work with 6 groupings of ministers, which unfold into 15 groupings, formations: industry, transport, agriculture. What the Secretary of State is pointing at is, would it not be reasonable, logical, to have one more of those groupings dealing with tourism itself? Because now it is only part of the Competitiveness Council.
So it's kind of a little footnote at the end of the agenda, so it's not a priority. That's what we're hearing.
Well, it's a possibility that we are reflecting upon. And from the part of the Spanish presidency, we are calling for an informal ministerial meeting of tourism in Mallorca. This is a step. But maybe it can be further institutionalized.
We will keep a very close eye on that. We have a comment from an audience member on that EU tourism agency that you pitched earlier, saying that this would ensure tourism is very, very high on the agenda and that more funding is allocated to tourism, and that, they say, could be very, very useful. And then we have another question from Tim Fairhurst. Thank you, Tim, for your question. Isn't part of the problem underinvestment by EU member states? Visa processing capacity in source markets, especially Asia, is way behind demand. Any reaction to that? Maybe Louise?
Well, it's way behind. I totally agree. Well, Asia now, it's behind demand because of the circumstances. We know. Japan, it's difficult to come here. They cannot cross the Russian airspace. It's expensive. It's becoming more and more expensive. And that's why I say that if we don't tackle these situations, that has to do with air connectivity, with how seamless our experience is, how seamless our booking is of any of our experiences in Europe, then we will never be competitive, and we will lose to other destinations. We will lose to America, we will lose to Asia, we will lose to Africa, to Southern America. And my biggest concern is that we're still discussing in the theoretical plan and not taking action in what needs to take action quickly. Because it's not the time to discuss things, it's the time to do things. And we feel that we've been discussing too long and throwing guilt from the state members to the union, to the commission, from the commission. I think the idea and the purpose of having a strategic framework and having a transition pathway for our industry is wonderful from the Commission side, but still, it's not a paper thing. We need funding, we need support from the members. So this is clearly what has to be discussed in a more broader scope.
Okay, your message is very loud and clear there, Luis Araujo. We're running out of time. Very, very brief comment.
That was the idea of the European Agency for Tourism, because it's an ecosystem in which many issues are involved: transport, competitiveness, social rights of the workers. So it takes overall strategy, and the idea was precisely to help not only to share good practices, but also to enhance the capacity to access to financial instruments, funding, EU funding, particularly in situations of crisis or adaptation to a new situation. And certainly the Fit for 55 and the strategy of the European Union to fight climate change will raise new challenges for the tourism industry, insofar as it is simply raising the costs of traveling, that's for sure.
Quick question from Slido here for yourself, Jorge Casal. Is Europe performing better in shopping tourism than other destinations, for example, the US?
Yes, Europe is doing very well, as I said before. Recovery across most nationalities is very strong. And back to what we were discussing before, I think there are more and more countries which are looking at tourism as a top priority. And despite Europe being the top tourist destination, we have to be mindful that countries across the world, they are investing a lot of money in infrastructure. They are simplifying the procedures for visas, and they are making it simpler to go, and they are...
And just on that infrastructure, sorry to cut you off, we have a question here for yourself. Suzanne, it's about investing in train connectivity, because we all know Vienna is a bit of a hub for night trains. Do you plan to keep this commitment?
Yes, we plan to, and there will be also, there is a plan to have a lot more night trains. Because this is one of the most important mobility success factors for the future.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Any reaction there to anything else you've heard?
We don't even have night trains, so...
Well, we'll
we'd
be
love
hearing...
to have more investment on trains.
And later on the day, we will have Rail Europe up on stage.
That's another thing. Of course, many of our countries haven't invested in train as others have, or have specific locations inside Europe that don't allow them to have trains or be so well connected with trains. So once again, when we take a decision on what we do with air connectivity, we have to think on the competitiveness of each country.
Final comment with yourself?
I think connectivity is of the essence, because it brings people together. Europe should be connected to the world, and the regions within Europe should be connected to one another, but it is up to the destinations themselves to decide where they want to promote their destination and how they want to do this. If they decide not to do this on the long haul, it is up to the destinations to do so.
It is up to the destinations, and later on stage we will have a representative from Visit Finland, so we can talk to her about that. But for now, I'm afraid that is all we have time for this panel. This was the first session. So thank you so much to you all. Thank you to the Ambassador for being with us. Thank you to the State Secretary for Tourism, Suzanne Kraus-Winkler. Thank you to Juan Fernando Lopez Aguiar for being with us here. Also thanks to Jorge Casal for your perspectives, and to Peter de Wilde, and of course to Luis Araujo, the President of Tourism de Portugal. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the Destination Europe Summit. I shall catch up with you later. And ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause.
It's been a pleasure.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I think now, as we get ready to invite the European Commissioner for the Internal Market, Thierry Breton, up on stage, it's a good time to check in with our poll to see how you answered to that Slido, to get your perspective. So if we could have a look perhaps at that Slido, the outcome of that Slido, to see how you feel the biggest challenge is for the industry. So yeah, okay, inflation and economic uncertainty right up there on top as the biggest challenge, of course, to the sector this summer, and then Russian invasion of Ukraine the second. That's something that we will bring up a little bit later with our panelists. Second question there, do you believe that the digital Schengen visa is a positive development? Yes, so 93% of you here and online agree with that statement. Well, thank you so much. Great to have your take as well on everything that we're discussing today. I think we're almost ready to invite Commissioner Breton, Thierry Breton. He's, of course, comes from France, a former businessman, and is currently very busy at the European Commission as Internal Market Commissioner. He's literally just fresh off the plane from San Francisco. He was in Silicon Valley last week, sitting down face to face with a number of very successful tech companies, and also talking to them about the EU's AI Act that was just voted upon by members of the European Parliament a couple of weeks ago in Strasbourg. So we're absolutely thrilled to have him with us physically here at the Destination Europe Summit and to hear his perspectives. We'd also like to hear what you think about what he has to say. You can use the hashtag Destination Europe Summit so you can feed your comments here into the discussion. Thierry Breton, all we need to do now is give you a big round of applause. Welcome. Good morning. How are you?
Fine, but I'm not a Frenchman. I'm a European Commissioner.
Well, of course you're not just a Frenchman. You're not just representing France, you're representing the European Commission.
It's the first time since 4 years that I'm introduced as a Frenchman.
You don't feel a little bit French still?
No, it feels good.
Take a seat.
It's very new for me.
A European man. Just like we heard earlier, Peter de Wilde very much in touch with his European identity and his European roots in the previous
panel. And don't forget also former finance minister, which is much more important.
Absolutely. You've got a colourful, interesting background. You've sat in all sides of the table, so it's very interesting.
The privilege of age.
The privilege of age, I know.
The only one, the only privilege.
Age is experience. Age is wonderful. So Thierry Breton, EU Commissioner for the Internal Market. Great to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here with this very important, we call it ecosystem, the most important.
Well, it's a very important time, as we said earlier, for the sector, for the tourism sector, for the travel sector. There's a lot at stake. And I don't want this talk to focus too much on the past, but obviously there was the pandemic. You were at the forefront of that as Europe opened its borders. Was there one lesson, perhaps, that the industry should take away from that?
Well, first, it's true that the tourism ecosystem has been really hit hard by the pandemic. Because of course, no one was traveling, everything was closed. It was important to keep also employees. So we reacted very, very quickly, and I think we could be proud of what we have done at the European level, all together with this Next Generation EU huge package for the first time in our history.
And a lesson learned, perhaps?
And the lesson learned is that everyone understood a big part of this amount came to the tourism, so everyone understood how important is the tourism for Europe. We all knew that, but it was important versus also all the other ecosystems. The lesson learned is, of course, that we understand that we are strong together, even in adversity. And this is how we've been able to cope with the situation. We reacted quickly also to reopen, we call it Reopen EU. We invented this pass, you know, to make sure that we could give also security for tourists, reopen the borders. By the way, it has been a success because it has been approved by 81 countries, 2.3 billion people are using it, and now it's a WHO reference.
And when you say the biggest lesson, Commissioner, was that we're better together and we worked together, do you still feel that that is the case, that is the status quo?
Of course, we have done, we have decided for the first time ever in our history that we have now a view of where we want the tourism to be by 2030. We've worked on this, we have discussed, it has been approved by all member states, so we are pretty well aligned. In other words, we are, of course, we all know here in this room that tourism is absolutely critical for as an industry, but also for Europe, the largest, the biggest destination in tourism. So that's really part, of course, of our what we are. So no, I really think that the main lesson is again, Europe is strong because we are together.
And on that note of vision, what would your vision be for European tourism?
That's definitely also, that's another lesson that we need to draw now. It's true that you see for our fellow citizens, there is a before and after pandemic, change the habits, change the habit of working, change the habit of living, and also change the habit of tourism. And I really think that we need to really to understand these new trends, which is of course more inclusive, which is of course more much more concerned with our environment, with our cultural environment, with our ecosystems. So there's a totally new way of inventing tourism related to these new aspirations of the new generation, but not only. And this is really something which will change a lot. Of course, digital transition will change a lot our way to build our offers and to run tourism activities. But also, these new trends is really something that I think is fascinating because it creates tremendous opportunities, but we better understand deeply what it is.
And what do you think is the biggest challenge, perhaps, for the sector? Is it going green?
Going green, yes, it's important. It's important for all of us, and I know that tourism is playing a big role. Today, for me, I see there's very strong appetite for all our fellow citizens to enjoy tourism activities. When I see the bookings, of course, you know this much better than me, but I think it's pretty good. Huh? I'm looking for some of the experts of the sectors. They're nodding. Pretty impressive. And then, since it's pretty impressive, for me today, I think the biggest challenge today is probably skills and people. I'm afraid we don't have enough new talent to welcome and to organize for this important trend that we will enjoy.
So what is the solution to this challenge?
The solution is something that we need to discuss together. I'm not a magician.
Perhaps it's a topic for Nicolas Schmidt, your colleague.
Of course, we are working together with Nicolas Schmidt on, as you know, the tourism transition pathway, which is very important. It takes time. It needs also to reinvent probably also the jobs, the way they were probably designed before. Including regarding what I said earlier, in the new way that ecotourism, maybe also some more local sometime. So it really means to have a deep thinking, and this is why we are.
But you mentioned deep thinking. Is there time now for deep thinking as we now go into July, August, which will be peak tourism season?
But you didn't wait me for it started already. Yeah? I mean, I know that because I know all the players. We were discussing a lot of this, so of course we didn't wait today. So, but that's really probably one of the big challenges that we have now. And of course, then you mentioned it. The green transition, digital transition is also something extremely important. Using the right way data. You know that we are working on the data space for tourism. That's extremely important. It will be finalized very soon. You know that we're working also for, other aspect of tourism, using.
How will that change tourism as we know it?
I beg your pardon?
The data that you're working on.
But I mean, first it gives a lot of information about what kind of offer you could specialize. Tourism means also that you could finalize a product that you want for you, which is very much important. That's something totally new. The package also, that you can be part of it. But it's also some security also for the tourists themselves, because of course it will harmonize the way, for example, for short-term renting, it will harmonize the way you do it. It gives security. So that's both ways.
And as I mentioned earlier, Commissioner Thierry Breton, you were just in San Francisco.
Yeah.
You were talking tech over there. How did that go, and what do they think of the European plans to regulate AI?
Well, as you know, we don't only regulate AI. We have decided to organize our digital space. That's something also I worked very hard since my first day in the Commission. Our digital space was not organized at all. Some were saying it was a little bit the Far West, especially in social media, and you know what it means. You could have some tragedy also here, so we decided to organize it. It has been quite a journey, but we did it with a DGA for Data Government Act, with DSA, Digital Services Act, to organize again the social networks, DMA, to have fair competition in it, Data Act, which will be important, including, of course, for tourism, and now, of course, AI Act. So there's 5 pillars to organize it. It was extremely important, again, to give visibility, including for business. It's important to have rules. It's important for innovation to have rules also. So now we are the first continent to have these rules. So AI is also part of it. We worked almost for the past 3 years on it. Now this AI Act has been position has been adopted by the Council. Position has been adopted also by the Parliament. So we started already the first trilogue a week ago. And of course, it is a risk-based regulation, and it was important for me to explain all this. Of course, we are the biggest continent of the free world in terms of in digital, 1.5 bigger than the US, which is very important. It gives us, of course, responsibilities. So it was my job to explain, of course, to all the players that, of course, everyone is welcome. We are an open continent. But these are our rules, and now these rules will be the law. And I help these companies, not only US, by the way, Europeans, and elsewhere, including in Asia, to understand exactly what are our laws and how to be prepared, because, as you know, for the DSA, it will be enforceable on August 25th. And for the AI Act, which is a risk-based, again, regulation, we are hopes that to be able to finalize a trilogue in Q3.
And you hope that it won't be outdated by the time it becomes law, the AI?
No, because this is again an horizontal risk base, so it cannot be updated. You could always plug. This is why everything we do in digital, it's horizontal, and you can plug in then a new, let's say, delegated act if we see something new happen. Because you're right, technology could evolve, and we may see new risk. Of course, we don't want to regulate everything, but if we see a risk which will have to be regulated that we don't anticipate now, we will always be able to plug a new dedicated act.
So we have the rules set in stone, and your job will then be the enforcer.
Yeah.
That will also be a challenge.
Well, I'm already the enforcer on the internal market, and that's why that's a very good question, because we design this not as competition tools. We design this as internal market tools. In other words, I'm already the enforcer of the internal market. You cannot do everything. Of course, the internal market is big. That's a tremendous strength of Europe. But of course, you cannot do everything. You cannot import everything. If you import toys, there's some rules that these toys are not dangerous for children. And if not, of course, we will enforce. So I'm already the enforcer of the internal market. And these rules in the digital space are ex ante. So that's an ex ante regulation. In other words, to be able to enjoy the capacity to benefit of the biggest digital market of the world, you need to follow some rules to enter. By the way, this is what I said. If I take the analogy of car industry, in Europe, we are driving on the right side of the road. So if you build
except
a car,
in Ireland,
if you're a continental Europe, if you have other cars, you need to change. But my job is to explain this, and then it is a regulation and an enforcement again ex ante.
And what about companies who are threatened by these rules and they're threatening to leave Europe because of the amount of burdensome legislation?
No one. No one, of course, because it's the biggest digital market of the world. So no one can afford. It's 1.5 bigger than the one in the US. No one can afford not to be. And we welcome everybody. It's true that maybe you mentioned Sam Altman. but he told me that it was misinterpreted. So he changed his tweet and he said, "I love the regulation. We will follow, by the way, including on watermarking," which is probably normal. I've been, as you mentioned, a CEO myself. I will never say I don't want to enter into this market because it's too much difficult for me to follow the rules. Rules are rules. Politicians are here to make the rules to secure when we believe it's important the way our fellow citizens are living in this space or that space, and companies are here to follow the rules, and they will. Don't worry. No one will leave. No one. Okay. And by the way, it's good for innovation too. Again, since you mentioned it, when I was a CEO, I operated in more than 100 countries, and of course, we had different rules. And I always told to my employees, we need to be good citizens in every country on this planet, and not to change the rules and to say to a government, you have bad rules, change it. You have to be a good citizen, including when you're a CEO. So I know that they're thinking like me, because all CEOs are thinking the same ways.
Let's see, and later we'll have the opportunity to speak to Glenn Fogel, the CEO of Booking.com. But regarding...
I'm sure he agrees with me, well, right, Glenn? Voilà.
It's good to be a good citizen.
And you will be, huh? And you are.
Commissioner Thierry Breton, what about the tourism sector and the travel sector, the role that AI can play in their future? What message would you have perhaps to them?
That's very
bearing in mind that the majority are SMEs as well.
Yes, you're absolutely right. That's a very, very important question. This is why, by the way, you know, when we speak about AI, we basically speak about three things: data, algorithm, and computing power. So that's why we really want to have a data space for tourism, to make sure that we organize us well. Who owns these data? How to organize this data space? It's extremely important. This is why we want to finalize this data space for tourism. Using this data will be a fantastic advantage, of course, for everyone, and especially for the tourism industry, including, by the way, that's the second phase, to develop some specific algorithm focused on tourism, and this will be, of course, part of the job of tourism entities, but also other services companies. And then you need computing power. And you know that in Europe, with Euro HPC, we have developed the largest HPC for supercomputers, high-performance computers. The largest infrastructure in the world, which will allow big companies, small companies to have access to this computing power, to develop also their algorithm and the training of, again, data on the specific tourism algorithm to develop specific activities. So yes, Europe is and will be a fantastic place to invent new AI application, especially for tourism. We are the first tourism destination of the world. So we are the one generating the largest, biggest number of data in tourism on this planet. So it's very important now to develop these new applications. And with all these, let's say, rules that we have put in place, and it's very important again, as a CEO, I could tell you that it's extremely important to know, to have rules, they will stay, but to have now, finally, visibility. So then your last comment, including SMEs, you're absolutely right. SMEs are extremely, extremely important. That's extremely important for the tourism ecosystem. So here we need to see how we could support, help, including in the digital transition, including to use, by the way, these new tools. We are working now on a dedicated package on SMEs. I think it will be for next fall that we will present it. It's extremely important. It will cover a lot of issues that SMEs have in the tourism industry, including late payment, including many things that hopefully will have less burden also, less administrative burden, and many other things.
Okay, and what's your take on short-term rentals? How can they be better managed?
No, you know, I don't want to go, this is what I said, we discussed at the beginning of our discussion. It's part also of the new way to make tourism. So And I see that, for example, in countryside, it could be a very nice offer. So I don't want to here to say it's good or it's bad. This is something that is developing, so we need to follow this. But here also, we need to make sure that we could have the quality, that we could have. This is why we will have also some specific data here, and a specific regulation. We're finalizing it for short-term rentals, which will be finalized before the end of this year, and then available for the sector, giving more visibility for the sectors, giving more security also for the users, and also being able to develop it using this data. But I really think that this is something which exists, so we need to take this in consideration. But organize it a little bit through data is probably one way to do it.
And Commissioner Breton, what about the geopolitical situation in Europe? It's of course extremely volatile. The sector very concerned about the impact the war in Ukraine has had, and the sanctions, of course. What would you say to them on that regard?
Well, I mean, this is our world. We cannot, not only we cannot change it, but we know that these tensions are and will play an important role, including in tourism, of course. When we see this, needless to say, with Russia. We saw this maybe a little bit with China, which is a very big an important country in terms of tourism. So we hope that everything will come back to normal with China. I know that we had some reduction of the number of tourism, but we are welcoming them, of course. But yes, you're absolutely right. That's really something that we have to take in consideration. For us, it means also that I mean we are the first global destination for tourism in the world, and we know also that for our 450 million inhabitants, Europe continues to offer a lot of capacities in tourism, and which is maybe not yet totally exploited. So I think that's also something that will be good. Not only, we don't want to close everything and to stay between us, but yes, we have this war. This war is definitely changing a lot of things. We, as you know, we said clearly at the Commission and in Europe that we organize ourselves to support Ukraine as much as we can, and we organize it on the long term, because of course, we could have good news, but we see over the past event that there's some. It's always difficult to predict what happened with our big neighbor, and that's why we will do everything we can to continue to support Ukraine against this terrible aggression.
And this continent has lost a lot of Russian tourists, of course. Flows have dropped by 90%.
Yes, it's true that Russia is a big country, 143 million inhabitants. It's not the biggest country in the world in terms of population. This is 10 times smaller than China or India. So we have a lot of other potentiality. But of course, we know that when Vladimir Putin decided to launch this terrible aggression against Ukraine, we had to react, and we did.
And as you mentioned, and as we're hearing today, Europe is a leader for tourism, and we have, of course, the Schengen area. We have Rome, like at home, to make life easier when you're traveling. But of course, there's room for improvement when it comes to getting a Schengen visa and the availability as well of cross-border train connections. How do you think these issues can be fixed?
Yes, no, that's a never-ending fight. That's a never-ending fight. We can still improve. We did it a lot, but I know that we need to continue. So I don't want to enter into details, too many details, but everything we do to smooth, including pass, including transition pass, we do it. I just mentioned that we have been able to put in place this COVID certificate, this pass. So we learned a lot how to make things much more easy using digital. So I know that we are not at the end of the process, but we are working hard, and we will continue to enhance the fluidity within Europe, because this is what makes tourism attractive, of course.
And do you think we can go green on this continent and reach the ambitious goals and stay competitive?
We have to. We have to. There's no options. No options. And it's true that it's a challenge, but we will be green. There's no other options. That's, of course, the goal of our generation and the generation to come. We will have to. But also, and I keep saying this very often, it's not while restricting our movement or our consumption that we will get our green. Of course, we need to make sure that we can save energy, but it is thanks to innovation, thanks to technology, thanks to science, that we will do it. So in such a huge transition, which is in a way a revolution.
But family businesses are overwhelmed. Family businesses, SMEs, they're overwhelmed.
Yes, but it's part of the ecosystems. We will not do things only for big companies. When I'm saying that, it's of course that I'm a strong believer that, yes, just living, I was before you, this meeting, I was in a meeting with the Clean Hydrogen Alliance. We were discussing how hydrogen will change also our way of movement. That many things will happen. Many things will happen, and I'm confident. But I know it's quite a journey. It will require also a lot of fundings, a lot of energy, but we are here for that.
And next year, of course, we have European parliamentary elections.
Yes.
There will be a new administration in place. What is your plan?
My plan is to work until the last day, and then we'll see. You know, I never made in my life plan for myself, but when I'm in service, I work with full energy. That's what I'm trying to do. So I will do till the last day, and then we'll see.
And what about the sector, the tourism sector? What do you think should be the plan for the next couple of years for that in the new administration?
Well, we have a vision now. We have a global vision that we put in place. We share the vision. As our ambitions, the first time in our history, it was good. It is really something I wanted to do together with all the ecosystem. So we have the plan, we have the vision, we have the plan. But now, like always in life, execution will make the difference. So I really hope that now for the next Commission, executing our vision will be the challenge and will be the objective.
And just back to the here and now, or summer season, in just a couple of weeks, everyone on this continent will be on the move. Is the continent ready for this? Are our airports ready? Our infrastructure?
Yes, I really think so. Yes, I really think that everybody is very excited for that. Everybody is waiting. Yes, I really think that we are ready. When I see the forecast, I was astonished, but it's very good news. So we all have to be ready.
But you remember last summer,
including, by the way, again for skills, and that's why coming back to what I said. If I have one, let's say, not concern, but one point of attention, it is really to be able to hire and welcome the people that we will need to serve the tourism.
So we won't have images this summer on our screens of long queues at airports, strikes by air traffic controllers, people not getting access to car rentals, hotel rooms full.
But you will have also the image of tourism going in the countryside, working with their kids, being on the beach. You can see the two sides of the coin, and the one I describe is more important. The one you describe, or you don't describe, you fear maybe. Hopefully will not happen, but I know that everyone is working extremely hard for that.
Okay, just one final question. What about yourself? Where will you be going on holidays, or what will you be thinking about when you go on holidays?
Usually what I'm doing, I don't take too much vacation, but there's something that I do every summer. I'm going for 1 week or 8 days. I'm going to walk in a part of France that I like, which is totally a desert, which is La Creuse. You see, they're laughing. And it's true, because I don't meet anyone except Cause.
I love it. And you can turn off your mobile phone and disconnect from the world.
And I get a lot of ideas when I'm walking, but I need to walk after 5, 6, 7 hours, then The ideas are starting to come, so that's what I'm doing every day.
Great. Commissioner Thierry Breton, thank you so much for being with us here at the Destination Europe Summit and here on Euronews. A round of applause, please.
Thank you. Thank you all. And thank you for... Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much again to the Commissioner for being with us here at the Destination Europe Summit. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for you to take a breath, stretch your legs, have a coffee, do some mingling, networking. That's, of course, as well what this is all about. And we'll be back here at 11:50. As I said, I'll be sitting down with the CEO of Booking.com. That's Glenn Fogel. For those of you online, thank you so much for being with us. You can also put on the kettle, and we'll be back here at 11:50 with our live stream. Thank you so much for your attention. See you soon.
the rules must be complied with by everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
Usual stuff. So.
You want me to try again? Hi, Christina. How are you?
The
Do you hear me?
test, test, test. Can you hear?
que c'est vous
to the second half of the Destination Europe Summit. I hope you had a lovely coffee break, had some time to catch up with colleagues and discuss what you heard already this morning. A warm welcome as well to all those joining us on our live stream and on our YouTube channel. Throughout the break, I had a chance to take a look at some of the comments on YouTube. A lot of people super interested and eager to come and visit Europe. So thank you so much for being with us and for tuning in. And for those of you here in the room as well, if you're using social media or online, it's Destination Europe Summit. Now, before the break, we promised that we would have a special guest up on stage now to digest and process all we've heard so far, and that is Glenn Fogel, the CEO of Booking.com. So I'd like you all to put your hands together to invite him here up on stage to sit down with me. Ladies and gentlemen, Glenn Fogel. How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Welcome to Brussels. Welcome to the Destination Europe Summit. Good to have you here.
It's good to be here.
How have you found the event so far? What have been your main takeaways, perhaps, of what you've heard this morning?
Well, I like that Commissioner Breton said I was a good citizen. I like that. I felt good about that. I also thought it was amusing, people talking about trains and, the issue we need more night trains, and then we just should get our day trains working. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I grew up and I spent time in America, and I'm thinking, well, we'd just like to have any trains, really. You don't know bad trains until you travel to America.
Okay. Let's take a look at what we discussed this morning. And that is, of course, coming out of the pandemic. Even though I don't like talking about the past, it's important because that was such a destructive time for the sector. They'd never experienced anything like that. So I guess my first question is, how is Booking.com doing now? Did you emerge stronger from the pandemic? Because it looks like everything is back to normal, if you look at the figures, of course. So would you agree, perhaps, that no lessons were learned in the area of sustainability, for example?
All right, so there are a couple things to unpack that you brought up there. So first, I would politely disagree about not talking about the past, because we should always remember the past so we can learn from things that were done then, things that were done well, we should be very proud of, things that could have been done better, that next time when a terrible thing happens, that we can act better. So we shouldn't ignore that at all. And I think about that a lot. How can I be better prepared? How could our company be better prepared? How could the industry be better prepared? That's one. In an issue where we are, obviously a tremendous recovery, and we're all pleased with what has happened. We're not there yet. Inbound from Asia is not there yet. Comment made earlier about Chinese travelers to Europe, not there yet. Hopefully it will be there. We're looking forward to it. But one of the things in our industry is every day something's happening somewhere that's an issue that we got to deal with. And that's just the nature of the business, and we have to always be agile and move rapidly, and that's what we're trying to do.
So constantly kind of in crisis mode, you mean?
Yeah, that's the way it is. You're always thinking about how can I do a better job of making sure I'm advancing our business, that's what I'm trying to do, or someone who's a regulator, make sure we're trying to make things better so we'll have a better future.
And we saw last year what I guess people in the sector called revenge travelers, those making up for time they lost during COVID when they were stuck at home, and they were ready to pay anything just to get out of their 5 kilometers where they were stuck for so long. Do you see the trend again this summer, or do you think that inflation is taking its toll on people here in Europe?
So I have to be careful, because, as you know, we're coming to the end of a quarter, and we are a public company. So I have to be very careful what I say about how we're doing. But I can certainly say about the industry. That term, revenge travel, it's not a great term. It sounds, evil, revenge. But it is true. People were trapped, and people were missed out on so many important life events. And they wanted to recover. They wanted to go out there. And last summer was amazing. And right now, there are a lot of people traveling right now. And we're seeing some of the issues. It was interesting, the question was, will we be prepared this summer for the airports? Or will we my wife came over, was visiting, and she spent almost 2 hours here at the airport in Brussels yesterday in a line to go through immigration, passport control, and security. 2 hours is a long time. And the question, and that's just, we're not even to July yet. So what's it going to be next month? I don't know. Maybe there's more staffing coming on or not, I don't know. But I do know, though, I'd rather have long lines and lots of people than what the pandemic was, with no lines and no people.
And you mentioned staffing. You might see staffing, but of course that takes a lot of time as well, because people need to be vetted if they're working in security in the airports.
Sure.
Huge, huge challenges. But just back on whether people are thinking now when they travel with their head or they're thinking with their purse. And especially the smaller enterprises, SMEs, are you doing anything to support them?
Well, I think we do a tremendous amount for them, and we always have, and that's basically the way we started our business. Booking.com started by going out to the SME hoteliers who didn't have an ability to get tourists from around the world the way the big international chains could. So we were providing a platform that enabled a hotelier who didn't have to pay any money at all. We don't charge anything to put your hotel on our platform. We only ask to get paid when we've actually provided you with, as we say, a head in a bed. And it's interesting in Europe right now, as there's more and more of this, I'll call it chainification. The chains continue to develop. And this is an issue for the small entrepreneur, the small family-owned hotel. We are providing a mechanism for them to be able to compete better. And that's what I want to continue to do, continue to provide services. Again, we do it in a way that it doesn't cost, it makes a big difference, because let's face it, SMEs don't have a lot of capital. They don't have a lot of money in the bank. They can't afford to invest the way that a large international chain can. We're providing an equal playing field. And that's really, I think, very important. If we want to maintain what is a very important part of the tourism industry in Europe, which is those small, individual, unique places, we need to provide a way for them to succeed. And that is what I'm trying to do at Booking.com.
Is the risk, I suppose, that many of them close down as they try to translate policies, perhaps redacted here in Brussels or in EU capitals, obligations put on them to go green, to be carbon neutral, but they can't afford perhaps to even pay their bills?
Well, I certainly hope that won't happen. And one of the things that we've been very proud of is what we call our sustainability badge, our program that we put together to enable hoteliers, properties of any kind, to be able to join so they can be noted for what they're doing to be green. And we provide all sorts of information, all sorts of programming. We're willing to work with them to say, look, here's how you can do some things. Now, we don't go forward and say, look, we'll go buy you LED lighting for your place. But we do is provide them what we think will be valued. And then we give them a badge. It's a green leaf on the platform. When you do a search, you'll see a hotel that has 1 green leaf, 2 green leaves, 3 green, and the more leaves you have, the more sustainable you are. And the great thing is this enables, it gives a reason for a hotelier to want to do something that is good for the world, good for the environment. Here's the interesting thing, though. I believe in the long run, so many people who say that they want to travel sustainably will actually act that way. But right now, it's not that big a number who really we are seeing who are differentiating. It's something that we're working on. And I think we have a big role to play to show and make sure people understand that this is a sustainable way, because people say, well, I don't know how to do it. Well, we're providing a way to know how to do it. And I'm hoping over time, more and more people will choose the sustainable option over the less sustainable option. And that will help all of us.
Yeah, tricky though, isn't it, with this cost of living crisis that we're experiencing now here in Europe?
It's terribly difficult for many of the smaller hoteliers. Some of the people who are, let's face it, wages are going up, inflation, they had to pay higher wages to the people who work there. Now we know that the average daily rate has gone up too, but many of them are being squeezed. Again, it's one of the great things about our platform is that at least they don't have to pay for the distribution costs, the marketing costs, unless they actually have gotten the revenue already. That's a great thing for them. And there's so many ways. Again, the idea in our business is to, our reason for existing is to provide value to both sides, the traveler and the supplier. That's the reason we exist. If we don't provide real value, nobody has to use us. Every day, travelers come to our site The overwhelming majority, just such a high number, I won't give it away because again, competition and all that, but I'll tell you, it's an incredible number of people. They show up at our site, they go through all the different choices, they use all the information that we spend a tremendous amount of money putting on the site, and then that traveler does not book with us. What they do is, perhaps they call the hotel directly, or they go to the hotel's website, or a mobile app, or something like that. We get paid zero for all that service we provide at that time.
Are you okay with that?
I'm okay with it because it's worked so far, and it enables a reason to come on. I'm okay with that so far.
But you might change it if it's not working?
Well, if something doesn't change in a business, you don't have a choice. You have to change it. Right now, it's working okay. At the same time, we're providing a great thing for the services to the travelers for the suppliers. They don't have to use us. If we're not providing them with actual value, there are lots of choices for them to use. We have a tremendous number of competitors. Every day, we have to provide that value. And sometimes I don't think that's really recognized by some people in the industry.
And just one final point, perhaps, on the EU Commission's plans to go green and the Green Deal. Do you think it's adequate? It's supporting SMEs enough?
Well, I won't talk directly about that, but here's an interesting thing. So there was no plan at all. We came out on our own and said, look, we are a player in this industry, and we believe it's important. So we're going to spend our own money. I'm going to devote our own resources. I'm taking IT people who could be doing something else. And I said, no, this is a priority for us. Sustainability is a priority for us. So this isn't going to produce more profits today or tomorrow, but we're going to do it because it's the right thing to do. So we do it, and we come out with it, and we put this thing out. We now have over 550,000 properties around the world have joined our travel sustainability program. Here's the interesting thing. So we're doing all this, and we think we're doing the right thing, and now all of a sudden, I start hearing about, well, that's not good. This should be centralized and government run. And we're not going to allow you to have that private program that says sustainable. And I'm saying, so we stop this that's doing something good? And how long do we have to wait until your thing comes forward? And to me, it just doesn't make any sense. What we're doing is something that's good. Why would anybody want to stop it?
So a lot of uncertainty in your head there. Just looking ahead, so we mentioned it as well earlier this morning about the digital future, also a big ambition of the European Commission, and on the top of the tongue of most people here in Brussels. Booking.com, of course, already on the way there, a major investor as well in AI. How do you see the company evolve in this way? And as we mentioned, SMEs, how can they as well use it to support and be more competitive?
Yeah, so again, a lot of issues that you're mentioning here. So technology changes very rapidly, and new things are coming out all the time. We've been dealing with AI for over a decade. Much of our business is dependent on machine learning models and such. Now, for many people, the first time they heard about large language models, these chat AI type things, was in November when the announcement came out. Oh my God, and all these things, right? Well, obviously, it's an example of how fast technology changes. And now, all of a sudden, we need to regulate that too. And it's uncertain, how does one develop the regulations that are good for society, but at the same time, don't stop what could be very, very good services for people. It's very hard when things are changing so rapidly. Now, if you're a small player in an industry like travel, though, you just throw up your hands and say, look, I have no idea about any of this, and I don't know how to handle it, and I don't know what. I just hope that it doesn't hurt me. So you take something like somebody goes onto a chat AI service, and they type in, I want to take a trip, I want to go visit somewhere in Europe. Well, a hotelier has no idea, a small one especially, how am I going to be listed? How am I going to show up there or not? Booking.com, because of our experience with all the things we're working on, we know how to do this. We know how to make this happen better. We have thousands of technologists. I have a tremendous number of people who are doing AI stuff. We'll be able to work with this. Now, the danger, of course, is when you end up with regulations that come out that are favoring one area versus another area. So we need a level playing field, that if there are going to be rules about AI, it has to apply to everybody, not just some people. That's one. The second thing is, and I think it's mentioned a little bit, is how is this going to work with different jurisdictions having different rules? As a global company, and don't forget, almost every hotel in Europe is global in the sense you get customers from all over the world come visiting. How are we going to handle all the different rules if Europe has one rule, America has another rule? What about within Europe if the member states have different rules and China has a different rule, and India has a different rule? This is going to be very complex, and I just hope that the regulators and the governments get together and are able to think very carefully and thoughtfully about how to develop these new ground rules that is good for everybody. And we'll see what happens.
Because this morning, Thierry Breton, the commissioner, was very confident that those rules would be abided by and they wouldn't scare off any companies.
I heard him say that.
Let's wait and see. Another thing that tourism stakeholders have been voicing concerns about is the fragmentation of EU policies affecting the sector. This word vision, we've heard it again a few times this morning. Would you like to see more vision in the sector? And also perhaps would you like to see this European tourism body we heard about, or more meetings take place among ministers? Like, what do you think needs to happen to shake up the sector?
Okay, so there are two things. It's great to have a vision, okay? Visions are wonderful. At the end, it's easy to have visions. They're like ideas, you know, 1 or 2 euros, you have an idea. It costs a lot more to actually execute that vision. I believe one of the most important things is let's get the basics done right now. There's so much inefficiency. There's so much frustration. The fact it takes so long and it's so hard to go through different types of the processes. Our vision at Booking.com is to have a thing we call the connected trip. Because we know that for most people, planning your travels, planning your holidays is a difficult process. For example, anybody who here has booked their own flight, you know how difficult it is if you have a family of 4 to do it all. You're finding out which flight is good, which one not. By the time you finally finish and book your flight, the idea that at that point you're now going to get your hotel is almost zero. It's a very small number. Why? Because it was so hard. You want to go get a drink. You don't want to look at hotels, right? That shouldn't be. It should be easy. People can go out and they can get a mortgage on a house easier than to do a travel holiday. It's crazy. So we're trying to develop this, what we call bringing it all together, make it easier for people to do it. But that's not something we need the governments to work on. And the problem is, if a government starts putting things together that make it harder for a private enterprise to do that, that's actually making it less efficient. What we need governments to do is, can we please have enough runways at airports? Can we have ground transportation that is sustainable from the airport to the center city? Can we have enough people staffed for the security at the airport? There's so many things that shouldn't take a lot of effort. It's not a lot of technology is needed to make sure, okay, how many takeoffs and landings do we have? How many people are on the planes? So how many people are going to come through passport control? It's easy math. It's not requiring linear algebra. Regular algebra will figure that one out. And I just don't understand, why did my wife have a 2-hour wait yesterday?
I feel for your wife. We all know what that feeling is like. And then we have as well spontaneous strikes. You know, in Europe, in some countries, we love to strike.
Yeah, that's not good for travel, but it happens. That's an issue, obviously. Look, labor, capital, having the arguments. This goes back, a couple hundred years and trying to decide what is right. I believe that we should always try and work together. There are always a number of stakeholders that we have to deal with. One of the very important one is employees. Very important. If you don't pay them well, they will go somewhere else. If you don't provide a good environment, they won't be enthusiastic. If you don't provide a reason that we are here together trying to accomplish something, they will go someplace that actually has meaning, so that when they spend their days working, they actually feel they're accomplishing something that matters. I believe travel is a great thing. I've been here now at this company for 23 years. And people say, Glenn, why are you still working? You're 61 years old. Why are you doing it? And I do it because I believe that travel matters. I believe traveling around the world, I believe coming to different parts of the world actually makes people understand the world better. You know, I say this all the time, so I apologize to people who've heard me say it before. But there's a great line from a book written by an American over 125 years ago, a famous author called Mark Twain. He was paid to travel to Europe. He was a journalist. The newspaper paid him to come to Europe and the Middle East. And then he went home and he wrote a book. And the book is called Innocents Abroad. And in it he writes that travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. And I believe that. And I believe by us doing travel better, getting more people to go around and see other parts of the world, it's wonderful. Now we have to do it right, we have to do it sustainably, we have to take into account the communities that are impacted and all those things. But in the long run, travel makes the world better.
Travel makes the world a better place, and of course, seamless travel and having a great experience while you travel too. And that's why we're all here today at the Destination Europe Summit. And we had Glenn Fogel, the CEO of Booking.com. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Take care. That was great to get the perspective there from Glenn Fogel, CEO of Booking.com. And in just a minute, we'll be kicking off our second panel discussion of the day, our last as well. And on that note, I would like to ask you all to take out your mobile phones once more so we can do another poll for Slido and set the context for this round. So if we can get Slido up there on the screen, and we're going to ask you a question, which is, what key factors contribute to Europe's position as a leading sustainable tourism destination worldwide? And here you're allowed to choose more than one answer. So you can choose responsible tourism demand, train connections, green energy, sustainability certifications, biodiversity programs, or sustainability initiatives, EU Green Deal, public transport, or collaboration between governments, industry, and local communities. So as I said there, you can choose more than one, and a little bit later I will give you the results of that poll. I'm looking around me, and I think that we're pretty much ready to go with our second session, ladies and gentlemen, which is all about experience better. So that making sure when people are in Europe, whether they're Europeans or non-Europeans, any tourists, that they have an amazing experience, a memorable time, and that they can get around seamlessly. So I would like to invite up now our panelists. From the President and CEO of Rail Europe, we have Bjorn Bender. How are you? Very elegantly coming up the stairs. Hello. Hi. Good to see you. We also have Daniela De Silva. She's the head of sustainability, also from Booking.com. Good to see you, Daniela. You're very welcome. You can take a seat. Christina Hitatsari. She's the Senior Director of Visit Finland. Thanks for being with us. You can sit there. And representing the European Commission, the Director of DG Grow, we can welcome Valentina Superti. Welcome.
Hi.
You can take a seat just here behind me.
Yeah.
And then from Google, to get the industry perspective, we have the Industry Relations Manager, that's Feria Kasemi. You can sit there. Great to see you. And last but not least, also from the European Commission, but from the Cabinet of Frans Timmermans, the EU Climate Chief and Executive Vice President, we have Daniel Mess. So, great to see you all. Are you enjoying the Destination Europe Summit? Yeah?
Very much.
Thank you.
Lots of interesting takeaways so far? Yeah? Okay, well, let's start perhaps with yourself, with Google. Because, of course, Google, you know a lot about us, about our trends, about what we do when we're online, about where we want to travel, why we want to travel, how many we are perhaps in our family or groups. What preferences, traveler preferences, have you noticed and behaviors when it comes to sustainability?
Yeah, so what we're seeing is a little bit of an environmental awakening from travelers. We actually did some research in partnership with Kantar last year, and what we saw is that compared to pre-pandemic times, sustainability has actually increased in importance for about a third of travelers. And our search data actually shows that this sentiment holds true. So globally, what we've seen over the last 12 months compared to the 12 months prior is that searches, web searches for sustainable travel have increased by 36% year over year. And so what we're seeing is that there is this importance for sustainability. And in particular, actually, there was recent research from Euromonitor that shows that travelers are focusing much more on specific features of sustainable travel. And that's what we're really focused at for solving for when we look at our travel products across Google. So whether it's eco-certifications on hotel search, whether it's showcasing carbon emissions on flight search, or eco-friendly routes on Google Maps, that's what we want to make sure that we're showing to help enable travelers to make sustainable choices.
Okay, and many people perhaps opting for staycations as well because they're afraid of flying and the impact they're having on that. But we'll come to that a little bit later. And now get the perspective from Booking.com, from Daniela, and hear what you've seen about travelers' expectations and behaviors after the pandemic from your perspective.
Absolutely, and first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here today with such a diverse perspective on the stage. So we have seen that travelers are increasingly caring about sustainability, about the impact of their trips, environmentally, socially, economically. We do research every year with over 30,000 travelers from all over the world, and we see that steady increase. And so this year, over 3/4 of the travelers we surveyed said that they want to travel more sustainably in the coming 12 months. And we also saw that the pandemic had an impact on that as well, with 61% saying the pandemic makes them want to travel more sustainably. But I think we can also say that intent doesn't necessarily mean action, and there's still a gap there. And it's great to hear the data around the searches, because I think that's a positive sign. But what our travelers are also telling us is that there's 2 key barriers for them. The first one is around the perception of cost, and you just touched on this in the previous conversation. I'm sure we can dig in more. And the other is around the availability of sustainable options, or rather the lack of availability. On cost, you know, the same proportion of travelers who say that they want to travel more sustainably also tell us that the cost of living crisis and the energy crisis are contributing to their ideas about their spending plans. It's heavily impacting them. And 50% of travelers tell us that sustainable options are too expensive. So you see that dilemma coming in where they want to make a more sustainable choice, but they feel that that is mutually exclusive with actually making something that's okay for spending. And availability is the other barrier for them, in that they feel that there are not enough options available to them. And that's what we see from our accommodations as well. If you look at the supply side, that matches with less than 10,000 properties being third-party certified. That's less than 1% of the accommodations that we have on our platform. So it shows a real gap there, that if we want to actually meet that demand for travelers, there's a huge need to support the European accommodation sector and the global accommodation sector to actually increase their sustainability practices.
And just going back to transport, you mentioned the price. I mean, we're here in Brussels. To get to London, you see a lot of people taking the plane because it's just too expensive to take the Eurostar. Same with the Thalys to go from Brussels to Paris. It's so expensive unless you book months in advance. So consumers want to be sustainable, but they can't afford to. Bjorn Bender, is that something that you're addressing?
Maybe that's one of the extreme examples. Huh? So, of course, there's a high and increasing demand for Eurostar, for instance, but also other point-to-point relations in Europe. But first of all, the most important point for me is that the way how we look on rail travel, what we expect from rail travel, how we interpret rail travel, changed completely. Huh? So when I joined the industry, took over my first responsibility in a railway carrier 15 years back, it was quite unsexy to work in the mobility industry for a rail player. And of course, maybe we needed a bit all sustainable and climate discussions to see the advantages specifically for Europe and not for one country as a continent to travel within. And of course, yeah, we do have 12% more travelers in Europe in the rail industry in 2022 compared to 2019. So above already compared to pre-COVID, and this is a challenge because we expect very fast solutions from the rail industry how to travel in a sustainable way within Europe.
And would you thank perhaps people like Greta Thunberg, the Swedish climate activist, for making your job a little bit easier?
Yeah, at least partly, I would say, because of course we see increasing awareness how to travel, and we see in the younger generations increasing demand to travel in a different way, of course. On the other side, it's a lot of about reducing complexity. So I was listening to Glenn Fogel, and he was describing how complex airline ticketing or air ticketing is. Compared to the rail industry is very simple. So it's a lot still about educating, about bringing in visibility and transparency into the system, because it's quite complex, even for Europeans traveling within Europe and coming from overseas, and we are doing mainly business overseas. Bringing non-Europeans to Europe is even more complex. So yes, she's doing a great job, but it's a lot related to technology. Yeah?
Well, I mentioned her also, Daniel Mess, because Franz Timmermans, the executive vice president, once told me in an interview that it was thanks to her that we have an EU Green Deal and obviously the Friday for Future movements. But just in reality, tourism in Europe is, of course, very dependent on aviation. What are you doing, or how is the EU Green Deal addressing this huge challenge?
Yeah, no, thanks also for that question, because like one thing that we also tend to forget when we talk about the need to have sustainable travel is that we have the basic human need to travel. We have the basic human need, it's our liberty to travel the world, discover new places, discover new people. We all remember, I think, our first trip abroad. I'm a dad of 4. I tend to think I have a busy job. I want to travel, and air travel needs to become more attractive, and I'm a big proponent of that. But the reality is that air travel is also here to stay, to discover other destinations. And then the only answer is to see how can we make that air travel more sustainable and greener, so that people can take a flight without feeling flight shame, but just pride of doing something that it means traveling around in a decent way. And I totally agree with you that when setting overwhelming goals, that should not become an overwhelming experience. And a lot needs to happen to bring all these biokerosene and things like that to make air travel more sustainable. You need a big plan for that, and you even need also a big discussion with regions. My big fear is always that it will be the big airports first who will get the biokerosene, and then the regional airports who need it most, because the trains of Train Europe won't be able to reach the islands, will come last. So that's one of the areas where I would like to use the rest of the remaining political cycle that we have to really offer a regional pact on behalf of my executive vice president, to see how we can bring different players together, industry, government, to make sure that also these regions get sustainable travel, so that people can fulfill their basic need to travel around.
Okay, and that leads me nicely on to my question for Valentina Superti, also, of course, from the European Commission, head of DG Grow. Do you think that Europe is a real leader in sustainable tourism?
Good morning to you. Nice to see you again, and all of you. And thank you for the invitation. Well, first of all, Europe is still the leading touristic destination in the world. So I think the first objective that we have in the European Commission and in the European institutions is to keep that level of performance. But since we are very ambitious, Commissioner Breton said it, we want to be a trendsetter. We have a second objective, which goes further, and which is to become and to make of Europe the more sustainable touristic destination in the world. Needless to say, this is a complex operation. Tourism is, we are trying to have a scientific approach, an holistic approach. We are talking about quite an heterogeneous ecosystem made of different strands, which makes that we are operating at various levels. Let me say shortly, at least 2 levels. First is working hard on decarbonizing, basically making more efficient 2 main pillars, which are transportation on the one hand and accommodation on the other. So that's one strand of work. But then, you know, with a more, let's say, holistic or broad perspective, we are working on tourism as a whole, with member states, with the European Parliament, but also very concretely with the stakeholders on the ground. We are developing projects to go from vision to action, to reality, to try to translate these objectives into reality. And I want to say that sustainability is, of course, environmental sustainability, but it's more than that. It's about developing the touristic industry as being an opportunity for an experience which is also an opportunity to be more inclusive in terms of involving local communities, in terms of developing alternative routes, in terms of putting, emphasis on our common, very rich cultural and historical
Let's just hear
experience.
about that experience on the ground, because we're delighted to be welcomed by a representative here from Visit Finland, Christina. So just kind of tell us what that's like in reality, because you are showcasing or leading the way, perhaps, when it comes to being a sustainable destination to visit.
Well, yes, the reality is something very different, I would say. Of course, it's great to see that nowadays all the destinations are actually competing who is the most sustainable destination. We are not competing about the arrivals anymore, which is, of course, very good development. But I do believe that really, if we think about the success of the whole sector, it's really depending on how well we managed to balance the requirements of tourists and local people and also environment. But how to actually implement those objectives is sometimes a bit difficult, because we have heard already today that the majority of our industry stakeholders are SMEs, or in Finland they are mostly micro entrepreneurs, and they simply lack the resources and know-how how to invest in sustainable practices. And for that reason, I think that the NTOs like Visit Finland has a really, really big role in taking the lead and making it as easy as possible for anybody to join the road together for a better future.
Do they feel like they're having an almost existential crisis?
I wouldn't say crisis. Some of them have awakened earlier than others, but I think that the more we get companies on board, the more there will be followers, because they tend to, of course, follow or take the benchmark from those who are leading the way.
And that's something we heard from Glenn Fogel, the CEO of Booking.com as well. He discussed that support for SMEs. Perhaps you can shed a little bit more light on exactly how that program that you have works on the ground in reality?
Absolutely, and I completely agree. We see that SMEs are struggling to find the capabilities, the resources, the knowledge to implement on sustainability, and that's something that needs to be addressed. And when I mentioned earlier that there are less than 1% of the accommodations on our platform with a sustainability certification, there is a need to bridge that gap and to create a pathway. So we did release our Travel Sustainable program a couple years ago, exactly designed to address this challenge and to bring support to those accommodations, primarily SMEs. So it creates a pathway. We provide guidance, expertise, guidance, insights, knowledge to give more confidence to accommodations on what practices they can do on sustainability, so they can understand what sustainability means in their context and for them. And in turn, we recognize them for the actions that they're taking on sustainability. So with that badge, what we do, and Glenn mentioned the leaves, the idea is that we can showcase to consumers higher levels of sustainability, so that it's not zero to certification, because that's not attainable at the moment, and that's really difficult for us to achieve overnight. That gap is very large. But what the program does is it allows us to transparently show where an accommodation is today, the steps that they need to achieve to have impact on the industry and actually make a sustainability impact, all the way to certification. And we can create this cycle where we have more options that travelers can review and book with transparent information. We give that feedback back to the accommodations, and we create this cycle where we can actually encourage them to take action based on this growing demand and growing benefit. That's very much the idea behind the program, and what we see with the gap in the knowledge and the expertise and what we need to achieve the green transition.
And just back to Google there for more perspective on, I guess, the role of technology, what it can play here, also bearing in mind that I imagine a lot of these family businesses and SMEs are perhaps in rural parts of the continent where accessibility as well to even internet could also be tricky.
Yeah, I mean, the role of technology, I think there's a big piece here in terms of information and awareness. And I mentioned earlier that when we look at sustainability, a third of travelers have said it's increased in importance since before the pandemic. Then you also have a third that have said, that stayed the same for them. And then there's the final group where it's actually decreased in importance for them. And so what you see is there's actually this inconsistency across traveler views on sustainability. Now, that doesn't mean that that's not influencing their behaviors. Over time, what we're actually seeing is it's starting to have an impact on behaviors. And when you look at the younger age groups in particular, those 18 to 24 age groups, it has a significantly a greater impact on their behavior than different age groups. But when you ask them about things like carbon footprint, it's such an abstract concept that even though their attitudes are there and they say that they want it, they're not necessarily translating that into their behaviors. And I think that's where this value action gap comes into play. And this is where technology can actually make a difference in education and awareness, right? We see a lot of fragmentation across the industry in terms of the various certifications available, whether the various criteria is available in terms of being sustainable. And I think it's about coming together as an industry and making that information more accessible and more available across all these digital platforms in order to help kind of move that needle on these behavior changes and close that value action gap.
And Daniel, there as inside a cabinet there trying to write policies, I mean, there is no one size fits all when it comes to a continent like Europe. We're hearing as well different trends, different behaviors, very confused messages there. So not an easy task either that you have to do.
No, no, indeed. And I would like to zoom in and be a bit on the angle that we're talking about a lot about small family-owned businesses often that run these accommodations, because I think that's really a crucial point, because you know, our continent, European continent, is the ideal traveling continent, but these smaller businesses face big trends that they probably think like, how do I overcome these big trends? You have indeed the consumers who want to travel more sustainably. You spoke about the youngest age group. I have that too. We took a plane to Miami, and my daughter of 10 said, "Papa, will you plant a tree?" Because we're flying a flight, and then we came into the hotel and said, like, "Oh, don't use the towel. Use the same towel. Don't use another one." So, like, I face that pressure on a daily basis. The expectation of younger generation, that's coming the way of these family-owned businesses. This demand for sustainable travel. And then at the same time, these SMEs, let's not forget it, we understate that. They're still feeling the energy crunch of the energy prices. And at the same time, climate change is affecting tourism areas as no other the nature. And all of that is coming together. And I already said earlier, you must make sure that when an overwhelming trend doesn't become overwhelming, you need to become very practical and pragmatic about how to help these family-owned businesses overcome this. And again, I think that it should not be Europe dictating everything. That often my experience is also with kids, dictating is not always the best answer to cause a bit of change. The regions really remain important. That's also where regions can do local things, and this regional pact that I mentioned should be broader than just aviation. It should also be about, like, how do we help people to have the accommodations that they need. Before this conference, I saw this very helpful image of what a zero-emission hotel means. And then I thought, like, okay, with the towels and the minibar not always on, that's something that you think, oh, people can handle that. But if as you come to the top of the pyramid, the insulating your hotel, that's a big thing. And yeah, you really need, I think, a cooperation with the regions to bring all of that together so that also SMEs can come along. Because I agree with my colleague from the Commission. We have so many things going on in the Green Deal on how to build a sustainable continent. There's so many work streams that are going on mobility, on the energy performance of buildings. We just need to really bring that together, because like that we can indeed also have the ambition to also be the most sustainable travel continent.
Something to add there, Valentina?
Excuse me?
Anything to add there to what you've heard, to complement what you've heard?
Well, you know, our starting point in these discussions is that tourism ecosystem is very important. So we say 10% GDP in Europe, 13 million jobs, direct and indirect, and 99% SMEs. So that it in itself, I think, gives the level of the challenge that we are facing. It's a huge challenge. I always hear all the time, you know, these small, when I meet them, these small businesses saying that's all what you say is very nice, is very, you know, laudable. But we are struggling with our business, and we need just to, you know, to be able to survive and carry on. So that gives you the level of, you know, of the challenge for our work. We are doing our best. We are, for example, by the way, compiling in a as it is possible interactive way, for example, information on available funding, on availabilities in terms of mentoring. It's a lot about awareness raising. That's the first step. And then it's about, you know, indeed support in getting it done. Yeah, a piece of advice we are always giving to these small businesses is please network and come to Brussels, because alone it's challenging.
Is that a reality for them to network and come to Brussels when they're busy running a business at the same time?
Well, it might be a solution for some, but for the majority, I wouldn't say so. I really see that networking and cooperation within your own region is maybe more feasible. By doing things together, you can avoid overlapping work and also reach synergies within that region. And in the end, it finally probably also ends up with some kind of reducing costs when we do things together. So.
And what kind of advice do you give SMEs that are struggling and trying to reach these demands of being sustainable and answering to the demands as well of consumers?
Well, we of course, like I said, try to do it as easy as possible, and we actually launched our first sustainable development project at Visit Finland already 1993. So it's a long way to go. But of course, during the last 5 years, we have changed a bigger gear into what we are doing, and when we started our Sustainable Travel Finland program. And that's an easy platform for any company, also the micro entrepreneurs to join the journey. And we are offering all the tools and guidelines and platforms and digital platforms for them so that they just follow the path and see that what is the next action that I have to take.
And just another question there on measuring success, because of course in the past it was always about arrival numbers and booked out hotels, but now it's more about sustainability being as well a success factor. How are you, what are the metrics? What's involved in this procedure?
Well, as we all know, there are several global and regional indicator systems available, and well, ETC has helped all the member states by putting up the list of 12 different indicators. And from them, my favorites are the satisfaction of tourists and satisfaction of residents, spend per visitor, and then the impact that tourism has on employment. Because the satisfaction is actually the only way that we can measure that how well we are fulfilling the mission of tourism, which is producing experiences. And we can see from many very popular destinations in Europe that obviously it's easy to offer great experiences. But the more crowded those popular places will get, the more there will be travelers who are no longer happy with that experience. And that development is further accelerated by the dissatisfaction of the local people, because if they see that the tourist is harming their everyday life, it's quite obvious that the less hospitable they will be towards the visitors.
Sure, and that's something we're seeing on the ground. Bjorn Bender, you're nodding, so I'd like to hear from you, but I also want to look around the room because we have about 18 minutes left for this panel. So if you do have questions, please pop them on the Slido. I'm just looking around for my iPad, if somebody could just bring it to me, which went for a little walk there, so I can check out your questions and address them as well to our panelists. But Bjorn Bender, a reaction perhaps to what you've heard there from Christina?
Yeah, so first of all, it's good to hear that travel is back and the demand is back, and now we are talking about how we measure sustainable travel and so on. And I would really underline what you said before in terms of inconsistency. You know? Maybe this is the biggest challenge we see as a mobility or rail industry currently, you know? Because of course the demand is higher compared to pre-COVID. That's good, but people are traveling completely differently. So because you're not commuting on a day-to-day basis, trains are really made for commuting usually. Let's say decades back. You are doing holidays in a different way, so shorter. You want to take your bikes with you and so on. And if you're talking about trains and rail, it's always becomes to a discussion to infrastructure and rolling stock and very, very long cycles. And this brings me back to my first statement when we are talking about expectations. So there is a lot we can do together as, let's say, the travel industry to really increase sustainable travel, supported by different means of transport. This is the important point, maybe, because we are having a very tense, a very emotionalized discussion how we travel, and this needs to be one of our goals, really, to de-emotionalize it also on a European level and to get the best out of our system we do have in Europe, and of course not only on the mobility sector, combined with tourism, combined with all the other possibilities other players are providing, and then it can fit into a more sustainable system. And this is maybe my biggest concern when it comes to our discussion. We have this from different perspectives.
Okay, too much emotion. Quick reaction to that?
No, like I tend to agree that like emotions go abound. Like when people identify flight shame, it's an emotion that they're talking about. And sometimes you also hear national politicians say, well, that means that you just need to travel once per plane. And then I always make the joke, well, I hope it's then a return ticket, because if I am on an island and I can't go back, then I have an issue. We need to make all these forms of transport sustainable, so that the emotion goes away and that people can focus on the positive emotion, which is experiencing new things. I totally agree with you that that is ultimately what we're talking about in tourism, giving a good experience. We just have the task ahead of us to make sure that that is a better experience going into the future.
With the clock, of course, ticking, and the context of all these crises, like the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis. We have a couple of questions here on Slido, so thank you so much for them. I'll start reading them out there. There's a question from Tour Spain Austria, from Daria Krak. Do you feel that sustainability measures are slowly implemented since companies are afraid of falling and afraid of being perceived as greenwashing? Perhaps a question for yourself, Daniela?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think there are a variety of ways to measure sustainability, and so you definitely see more scrutiny on targets, and I think that that's something that we're going to continue to experience, and transparency around progress, I think, is key in that case. So when it comes to a fear of setting targets because of scrutiny, I think we just need to remember that as long as you're sharing the progress you're making and the challenges that you're facing, that is the best way forward, because we don't want that to stall any progress. And I also just want to come back to the metric that you mentioned around satisfaction. I think this is so key, because if we're going to focus on the dilemma that travelers are facing on cost versus their sustainable experience, then we need to make sure that they perceive sustainability as a value add, that that's actually bringing the quality of their experience to a new height. And I think that that's something that we should certainly be looking into measure. How is that coming through? How is that sustainability experience really feeding into the value of their trip?
Reaction from you?
Yeah, I think that value add piece is really important there, right? Travelers want sustainability to be easy. They want it to be effortless. So they don't want it to take away from their travel experience. They want to have a balance. And what we've seen is when they're trading off things like costs or schedules, that's where it can have an impact on it. So I think if there's an opportunity to easily communicate the options that are available to them without that trade-off, they will lean into that sustainable choice. And it's on us as an industry to help them make those choices.
Okay, we have a comment now from Sebastian saying, simple observation, booking a multi-stop travel by plane is very easy, but trying the same for a cross-border train can end up in total frustration. Why, Bjorn Bender?
No, it's exactly what I was mentioning with complexity. So we do have in the rail industry very national focuses for centuries. Honestly, so we are really looking from France, from a German, from a Spanish, from an Italian perspective on our rail services. And they are not very well connected, specifically in cross-border services. So, and to understand that maybe the booking systems are 10, 15, even 20 years behind the aviation industry when we are talking about rail, this is very important when it comes to train bookings. And having this transparency out of different systems in one interface, and having also the possibility to go for the cheapest one or for the fastest one, that's key. And this is one part what no railway carrier can provide today. Because let's take the example, you're traveling cross-border from Frankfurt to Paris, and you have maybe 5 seats in the same train for the cheapest fare on each carrier. So if you want to have the cheapest one, you need to look at Deutsche Bahn and you need to look at SNCF. So there is the essential need for having a third party bringing in this transparency. And of course, yes, it's easier today in aviation, yeah, because it's compared to rail, unfortunately, much less complex.
Okay, thank you for that. A question for yourself, perhaps. How can we accelerate the net zero transition for hotels from theory to practice?
Sorry?
How can we accelerate the net zero transition for hotels? So from theory, from talking to actual real reality on the ground.
Well, yes, for that we signed last year together with 60 companies from Finland this Glasgow Declaration because it actually gives us tools how to tackle this CEO emission task, and that of course requires us to do the plan, and by doing it also together with our industry, we thought it would be easier for them to follow our example, that we provide once again the common guidelines and common templates how to do it. Of course, every signatory needs to do their own plans and own actions, but as much as we can support them and help them in that way, I think it accelerates the process, definitely.
Another question here for the Commission. Perhaps Valentina, I'll address it to you. A question about the concrete measures that the European Commission is planning to implement to help SMEs to become more sustainable.
Well, there is some budget. It is useful to remember that with this programming period, we are earmarking more than half of the budget, so this is close to 60% for sustainability and digitalization. And by the way, this is community budget, it's European budget, but it's also valid for the so-called recovery plans. So, I would say that from that angle, there are extremely important opportunities that are available for various measures at various levels, which are available. Then, of course, the challenge, and we come back to what we discussed before, it's also to the awareness, because we are dealing here with small businesses. But here it's where, of course, we are trying to maximize, on the one hand, our outreach possibilities at our level, but that's also why we need to work together, and we are working together with as many stakeholders as possible on the market, including, by the way, crucially, regions. So we are working with a number of regions across Europe. We are working with destinations. We are trying to work with networks. So we are reaching out in order to raise awareness and and translate these possibilities that exist into reality.
Into reality. It's always the challenge, isn't it? Implementation.
Yeah.
You had a comment there? Go ahead.
Yeah, because this is actually the crucial question, right? At least to us representing the Commission, how can you make this concrete to help this sector on this journey? And I come back to the point that we probably need to become better in the Commission in also bringing a one-stop shop to the tourism sector for all these challenges that they face at the same time. We have to do this big transition that they're facing, accommodation, nature, mobility. everything everywhere all at once is probably not going to help in terms of making people see concretely how to make this decision, but we're not starting from scratch. A lot is happening already. We have indeed a tourism sector that promised at the last climate summit already to go carbon neutral by 2050, setting itself a goal. You have the World Tourism and Travel Council having a very concrete plan how to implement that, and that then needs to be linked, I think, better with what the Commission is doing. And there are two strands here, and I just also spoke very briefly with the cabinet member of Monsieur Breton on that. He's of course the tourism commissioner and is doing a lot with the sector. And I just also said to the cabinet member, you know, I will today come also with the offer. There is a lot happening in the European Green Deal under the supervision of my EVP on buildings, on hence also accommodations, on mobility. And hence, I'm coming really, really seriously with the offer today to make sure that we also do our part and complement together with our tourism commissioner in doing exactly that, giving a one-stop shop to the sector that they can set achievable goals on this big journey. Glenn Vogel mentioned Mark Twain as a US author. It's a coincidence because I thought about that same quote, so I will try it then with Henry Miller, you know, who said, another American author, travel is not one's destination, it's a different way of seeing things. And we as a commission also need to learn and see things differently and help really this sector bringing this energy that they have already up so that we can play our part in doing that.
Very briefly, yeah.
Yeah, 1 second. I fully agree with that. But then I would come back to this idea, because we are going a little bit into the sustainability equals greening. It's not only that. When we are pushing for a sustainable tourism ecosystem, it's also about a more inclusive ecosystem, which is most respectful of local communities, where, you know, which is more respectful of local traditions, etc., etc. So it's not only, you know, of course, transport and accommodation are key, especially in terms of improving their level of emissions, hence impact on the environment, but it's not the whole story.
It's not the whole story.
I agree with that. Like, inclusivity is obviously
and that's
essential.
something you mentioned as well earlier.
Yeah.
Just excuse me to those listening for a little bit of a sound effect there in somebody's microphone. I'm not sure whose it is, but just adding a bit of a sound effect there. Bjorn Bender, and I'd like to hear your take on this idea of this one-stop shop. Like, how should that look? What would be helpful for you, and also for you at Booking.com and perhaps at Google as well?
Yeah, so maybe there are two levels for the mobility industry. So everything what is currently ongoing in the European Green Deal is great, first of all, because we really have the first, really the perspective on Europe as a continent for really supporting mobility and sustainable mobility for the future. That's perfect. Second one is maybe more the environment we are working in and the framework, how we exchange data, what are the rules, how we are working together to have a fair competition, also of course with private third parties. And yeah, there we are of course looking also to Brussels or to the European Commission, because this needs to be on a European level. I was talking before that it comes from the history, from a very national perspective. But now we do have maybe a once in a lifetime chance really to change that, for mobility, for rail, but it's very much related to travel. And tourism in total. So really looking forward. Many good things in already, and doing this together with the commissions and other authorities will be then the next level we can achieve together.
Okay, similar perspective that Peter de Wilde had this morning there for more coordination, more working together. But of course, EU capitals might have something different to say. Would you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of value that comes out of working together as an industry, and we're doing it already through industry coalitions like Travelist, which both Booking and Google are a part of. And you're seeing some great things come out of it, like the travel impact model that came out recently. And this is us coming together to find a way to collect and showcase carbon emissions data for flights in a unified manner. And you're seeing that this is what Google actually uses on our flight search, and as well as some of the other online platforms that are involved in the Travelist Coalition. And this is only possible by us working together.
Daniela?
Absolutely agree. I think we all recognize that there's a common goal here, whether it's the green transition or sustainability overall in the industry, and there is a need for each of us to play our part. regulators, policymakers, destinations, but also businesses can play a key role. And there is room for us to complement each other's actions. I think it's evidenced by the engagement we've had with the Travel Sustainable Program, with over 1.5 million properties sharing with us what they're doing on sustainability or what they're not doing, which gives us such a clear insight into what the state of the industry is currently, also a clear idea of opportunities, but a real clear idea of the challenges. And it allows us to actually build a plan to address those. And so what we want to see is laws designed in a way that allows for that innovation, allows for that collaboration, and a recognition for the ability to complement each other's actions, so that we can really collaborate and work together towards contributing towards the transition that we want to see.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Anything to add?
Well, I of course appreciate a lot of all these efforts that the Commission is offering us as member states for networking and creating policies and regulations, everything. But I would still like to emphasize the EU's role as a financial provider, because we still, I think that one of the biggest challenges for our success is the SMEs' capability to invest in these actions that are really badly needed. And for that reason, I really emphasize the need of the financial support from EU to the SMEs.
So the EU recovery funds, and of course making sure that that funding gets into the pockets of those who need it the most, and it doesn't get stuck in a bit of a traffic jam, bottleneck.
And evenly across the whole continent, and not just those countries who normally get the most out of it.
Now, we're nearly running out of time, but we have another question here, again about rail. There's a lot of people very interested in rail. Bjorn Bender asking about the future position of the night train in Europe. What can you predict if you look through your little glass?
Also a wonderful question. So, of course, we see a renewing demand for night trains, yes, and there are a lot of new connections coming up end of this year and also the following years. We see that private operators are entering the market. That's very good. So beside of the state-owned carriers. And yeah, I see definitely a huge chance for night trains in Europe, yeah, specifically when we are talking about, let's say, relations between 800 and up to 1,500 kilometers. Huh? And this is above, let's say, the usual distance for a day train. Yeah, and it's wonderful to combine, yeah, with a holiday and also for a business trip. Yeah, what it's needed, of course, are different segments, yeah, different possibilities for different target groups. Because when we are now talking about night trains today, it's very much related to leisure needs, and this will change, and this will also give us a new possibility, yeah, how we travel in Europe.
And just briefly, how do you visualize, like, what's your dream in your head of 2050 rail in Europe?
Rail in Europe, so it's really, let's say, it needs to be on a tact base, let's say, that it's clear that you can travel from center A to B on a, let's say, hourly possibility. Yeah, what we do have already on a national perspective in part of the countries, but also that we have invested a lot in new infrastructure. We heard this morning when the Portuguese representative was talking, okay, we do not need to talk about night trains, we do not have day trains, because infrastructure is lacking. So coming really to those investments, giving other possibility to have, an offer, an affordable offer, day and night in 20, 25 years, coming back to your question, would be a wonderful outlook.
Wonderful outlook, a bit of a utopia, let's hope. Thank you so much to our panelists. Don't go anywhere, because let's just look briefly together at the outcome of the poll to see what our audience thinks the biggest factor to contributing to Europe's position as a leading sustainable tourism destination worldwide could be. If we can just take a look at the results of the poll and bring them up on our screens. We asked you whether it was responsible tourism demand, or whether it was train connections, whether it was green energy or sustainable certification.
Again, train.
Train, there we go. Yeah, so there you go. What do you think of that, Bjorn?
Yeah, it shows the need we discussed, yeah, and it shows also the possibilities and opportunities we have. So let's take it as a chance.
Let's take it as a chance. Bjorn Bender, the President and CEO of Rail Europe, thank you so much for being with us. Also, Daniel Mess, Cabinet Member of Frans Timmermans and the European Commission. Daniela da Silva, Head of Sustainability at Booking.com. Thank you so much for being with us. And Christina Hitsari, Senior Director from Visit Finland. Valentina Superti, thank you so much as well to you. And Feria Kazemi from Google. Great to hear your perspectives as well. And thank you so much to you. You've been a fantastic audience. Thank you for being physically here with us. And for those online, thank you as well for joining us. And of course, we have to thank all those who made today a reality, the lead sponsor, Booking.com, and all the associate sponsors, Google, Global Blue, and Rail Europe. And a big thanks to all the teams that did all the work behind the scenes. You cannot see their faces, but some of them are Theodora, Tatiana, and Sabine. A big thank you to them. And the Destination Europe Summit is not over, ladies and gentlemen. It's just getting started for those in the room. There is a networking lunch now, so do make the most of it to reach out, chat, exchange ideas. As you said yourself, Valentina, it's all about networking and exchanging ideas. So that is why we're all here as well today. Thank you so much for your attention, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.